Hello, welcome back to the Timber Forge. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make custom blocks such as these two blocks right here. There are two methods that you may need to use depending on if you are using a transparent base block or not, and I will show you how to use both. I'm going to go over everything that you need to know, such as the place commands, removal commands, and how to customize it to make it your own. As always, there will be a table of contents down in the description below with timestamps for you to skip around to find exactly what you need to know. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment or join the Discord down below where we have an active community of lots of helpful people who are very knowledgeable about datapacks. So here's the basic rundown of how the system is going to work. So first of all, we're going to be using an item frame in order to display the model. We can't actually have full-on custom blocks in Minecraft, so we have to use an entity to display our custom model that we add through our resource pack. If you don't know how to make a basic model, check out my Blockbench video. But I'll show you the settings to be able to create an MC stacker command, which will give you an item frame which will already have your custom model inside of it, just like this. So right now there's an invisible item frame which has a custom model inside of it, which is this block. So once we generate that, we will also have a command which will detect that we placed any of these item frames down, and then we will set the block to whatever block we want. And then once we place it, we'll be able to detect when the player breaks that block. And once that block is broken, we will have our commands kill the display model item frame, and then we will also have it drop the item for the player to pick back up again. Depending on what block you're using, you may have to do a different method, but I'll show you two methods that you'll use depending on what block you use. So if you have a transparent block like glass, you'll see that the model has no errors if I set it to glass. However, if I set it to stone, you will notice that the model becomes all dark, and we don't want this, so we have to have a workaround if you are using a full block model. Before we get on to creating the commands for our custom block, let's first choose our base block. Since we can't add true custom blocks, we're going to have to choose a base block that will act as the functionality and the hitbox for our custom block. And there's a list of things to consider, starting with function. For example, you could use a dropper for custom crafting by using its 3x3 grid, or using a chest or barrels for its inventory if you're doing custom storage. Remember, you could always add more functionality later on, but it is easier to sometimes use the built-in functionality like GUIs and crafting grids. If function doesn't limit you too much, you could move on to size/shape. The base block that you choose will transfer its hitbox over to your custom block, so just be careful that you choose something that matches. You might also want to match the tool type/level, because if you're making a stone type block, you want to make sure that a pickaxe is the appropriate tool. Something that isn't too important but you might want to consider is explosion resistance. Choose something like obsidian or endstone for strong resistance, and something like dirt or quartz for low resistance. Finally, something to note is that the destruction sound and particles of your base block will transfer over to your custom block. So if you're doing a dark glass block, you probably don't want to choose something like quartz, which is bright and has a stone sound. So first, let's generate the give command for your item frame. So what you want to do is go to mcstacker.net, click on /give, and then start putting in your settings. So of course the item that we're going to do in the give command is item frame, and you could set the name to whatever you want. So I'm just going to put lucky block, and of course, as always, you could customize the color and lore and everything like that, but what you really want to make sure you have is custom model data. I'll show you how to configure the custom model at the end of the video, but for now let's get the functionality going. So we have all of these numbers here. This is just my random custom model data number that I happen to use. And then after that, we want to make sure that it has the item inside of it. And this should be the same item because we're going to be using the same model for the display in your hand as the display on the actual block. So set the internal item as another item frame and set the custom model data to the same number. And then after that, you want to make sure that the item frame that you will place down will be invisible and invulnerable. So make sure you turn invulnerable to true, invisible to true, and turn on fixed. And if you read this here, it just means that if the block that it's sitting on is destroyed, it will still remain alive. And we want to make sure that it can survive independent of its surrounding blocks. So we just have fixed to true, and that should be it. So now just copy this command. So before you use it, make sure you change this one thing. So let's paste it in here. And as you'll notice on MC Stacker, there isn't a spot to put your entity tags for your item frame. So what you have to do is add it in yourself. So go into entity tag, and right after the first bracket of entity tag, you have to add in your own entity tag for your commands to detect later on. So capital T tags colon, and make sure it's plural tags, and then 2 square brackets, and then add a comma. And then inside of here, put quotation marks and add your own custom entity tag. For me, I'm just going to do lucky block. And we will use this tag in order to detect the item frame when it is placed down. You also want to add silent 1B to make sure that the entity is silent when you place it down so you don't hear the squish of the item frame, and you could use the custom sounds that you could add inside of your place function. So now that we have added that into the load JSON file, what you'll see is when you reload, you should receive your lucky block. And when you place it down, it should display properly. Now, yours might just look like some random thing sitting on the ground, but I'll show you how to properly configure it later on. But as long as you place it down and you see your model sitting on the floor, then that means you are good. So now that we have it placed down, we have to get the actual hitbox. What you want to do is first create a folder. And this goes for both methods if you're using a full block or if you're using a transparent block. So create a folder and just name it as whatever your block is. So I'll just call it lucky block. And then inside of lucky block, we're going to need 2 more files. So we're going to do place.mc function. And as always, you could add this through VS Code or whatever code editor you're using, or you could manually create new files. So we want place.mc function and remove.mc function. So now that we have these two, they're pretty self-explanatory. The first one is going to place the block, and the second one is going to remove the item frame after the block has been destroyed. Now that we have the 2 functions set up, what we can do is run them from the main function. So what we want to do is detect any fresh item frame. So execute as all entities, and then the type equals item frame because that's what we're trying to detect. And we want it to have that custom tag that we just added. So if your tag was lucky block, you would put lucky block. It just has to match whatever you put right here. So I do tag equals lucky block, and then you want to make sure the block has not been placed yet. So I'm going to do tag equals not exclamation mark means that it doesn't have the tag, and then placed. And we're going to add this tag to this item as soon as we place the block to make sure that we only run it once. So execute on all of our custom item frames that have not been placed yet, or where the block has not been placed yet. Then at s, which means at the position of the entity we're executing as, which is the custom item frame. Then we want to run function, and we want it to be whatever our function is. So for me, the namespace is custom blocks. So function custom blocks colon, and then lucky block slash place. So now what should happen is as soon as we place it, it should run place.mc function. And inside of here, what we want to do is set the block. So we'll do set block at the current position because place.mc function is being run as and at the position of custom item frame. So set block at this position to whatever transparent block you're using. Again, I'll show you the system if you're not using a transparent block right after this. So set the current position to glass. And then now we are going to do tag at s add placed. So that's why we were detecting if it has not been placed here yet, because we only want to run this MC function file if the block has not been placed yet. And inside of here, of course, you could always add your own particles and sounds. So let me just find some particles real quick. So let's see, particle, I'll do like cloud or something. And then we'll do speed of 1, 10, let's say. So I'll just do that, and we'll get some particles. So now what should happen if I reload is that it should place the block and it should do some particles. See, as you can see, it placed the block and it did particles. So now what we want to do is when we break the glass, it should kill the item frame automatically. So what we want to do is go back into our main function and create something to run the remove MC function. So we want to do execute as all entities. Again, we want to make sure it's the type of item frame. And we want the tag to be our custom tag that we have to identify our custom block. And then tag this time, we want tag equals placed, because we want to make sure that we're only checking for the block if the block has already been placed by our commands. So then at the position of the custom block, and then unless the current block is Minecraft glass or whatever block that you chose inside of place.mc function, then we will run function custom blocks lucky block remove. Oh, lucky block / remove. So now that we have remove.mc function actually running properly, we can focus on the actual commands. So there are three main parts inside of remove.mc function that we want. First, we want to summon the drops that we want the player to receive. So in my case, I'm doing a lucky block, and I'm just going to do, for the sake of example, drop the lucky block itself. Then you want to kill the block drop. So I'm doing a glass block. So in case the player breaks it with silk touch, I want to destroy the glass block because I don't want them to receive that glass. And then kill the item frame. So if you're just going to have the player receive the block that they placed, then you basically just copy over your give command, and instead of giving the item, you're creating a summon command for an item entity, and then just copying over all your information. And in MC Stacker, just copy it over into the summon here. And you probably want to summon it like half a block up so it summons in the middle of the block instead of right on the floor. And also don't forget to copy over from your give command your silent 1B and your tags, and that should make sure that your item is identical. So now you want to kill the block drops. So for my example, in case there is glass nearby from a player using silk touch, so kill at E type equals item and bt equals item :id Minecraft glass, distance equals, I'll do a distance of 2, sort equals nearest, limit equals 1. Now if you want, you could also add a silk touch detection, but I'm too lazy to do that, and it probably really doesn't matter. And then finally, for killing off the item frame, just kill at S. So now if I go into the game and reload, you should see that when this is placed and broken, it actually destroys the model and leaves our item on the ground. For creating blocks that have a base block that is fully opaque, such as stone furnaces or dispensers, you'll have to do a different method than using a normal item frame, because like I showed earlier, it'll just get dark. So instead of using an item frame, what you want to do is use an invisible armor stand that is on fire, because when entities are on fire, they light up. And as you can see, this is a solid block of stone. If I remove this and use the pick block, you'll see that I get a stone block in my inventory because this is a solid block. So I'll show you how to use a flaming armor stand instead of item frames. Wait, the majority of this video was filmed before 1.16.2, and a change has been made which I need to go over regarding armor stands and their models. The issue with using armor stands is that the block model completely lights up even when in the dark. In 1.16.2 pre-release 3, the issue that caused the dark armor stands when in opaque blocks was supposed to have been fixed. However, there's a bug preventing it from being fixed properly. I will leave a link to the bug tracker down in the description below. If or when this bug gets fixed, I will leave a comment down below, and I will also edit the description, so go down there to check if it has been fixed. If it has been fixed, then you do not need to use the fire tag, and that means that the block model will properly match the surrounding lighting. For the example opaque custom block, I'm going to be creating a ruby ore block. So the give command is practically the same thing, of course just changing the name and changing the tag, making sure that you add the entity tags and the silent 1B. And after that, everything is basically the same. Then onto main.mc function, I basically kept everything the same here. However, what you want to make sure you do is instead of detecting item frame both times and detecting if it has been placed or not, since we're replacing the item frame with an armor stand, we could detect that instead of having to bother with the placed tags. So execute as the custom item frame that has a tag of ruby ore, meaning we just placed it down. Then we want to run the function for ruby ore place. And then after its place, it will have been swapped with an armor stand. So then we just execute as that custom armor stand that has the tag of ruby ore, unless the block has still been in place. So it will only run if it has been destroyed. Then we will run the function of removal. So inside of place.mc function, we have a similar concept but different commands. So what happens here is, of course, we set the block to stone after we place the item frame, but instead of marking the item frame as placed, we are replacing it with the on fire armor stand. So what you want to do is execute positioned 0.5 blocks forwards. That just means that it's going to be aligned with the block, because when you place an item frame, it's on the side of the block. So if you go half a block forwards, you're going to be directly in the center of the block. That's just to get a consistent position every time, so that when you do align XYZ, it's just going to align on the X, Y, and Z axis when you can summon the armor stand. And the whole point of this is just to make sure that you have a consistent point of summoning for any orientation of the item frame, so that it will always orient the model properly. So go to MC Stacker's summon section and create a summon command for the armor stand. And some of the settings that you want to make sure you have are: make sure that small is true, marker is true, invisible is true. And then also add in your custom entity tag. So for me, it was Ruby Ore. And then in the head slot, make sure you have the item frame with the custom model data. It's the same one that you were using for the placing of the custom block. And then you also want to make sure that you have it on fire. So go to fire here and keep it on ticks and just type in like 9 million. And then after that, you can just copy it over. So you just copy and paste that here, and you should be good. So now what happens is it will set stone, it will execute a little bit forwards, and then align with the grid so you get a consistent summoning point, and then summon your flaming armor stand that's invisible with your proper model on its head. And then it will kill off the item frame, so just add kill at S. So that should solve your dark model error when using opaque blocks. Now when I place down my ruby ores, you'll notice that they appear to be properly lit. So you'll also notice that they were silent when I placed them down, and that's because of the silent tag that we added, so you don't hear the squish of the item frame. But of course you could go into your place.mc functions and just input whatever sounds you want into here. So you could completely customize the place.mc function and the remove.mc function. And it's not limited to just custom particles and sounds either. Maybe if you have a larger structure that you want instead of just a single block, you could also use the place.mc function in order to generate that larger structure. Now I'm going to show you the settings that I have for both the item frame and the flaming armor stand method of custom blocks. So first of all, I have a 16 by 16 basic cube here, and this will work even if you don't have a perfect cube. All you have to do is make sure that it's centered on this grid. Then in display for the item frame, of course you have to go to the frame slot because that's the important display method, and change this so that the translation is -16 on blue and -90 on red. And then for scale, go to 2.01 on all axes. And then of course for ground and first person and everything like that, you could just change it to be however you like. Then for ruby ore, it's slightly different since we're using an armor stand. So again, same thing, 16 by 16 by 16 centered on the grid. And then display, go to head because that's where we're displaying it on the armor stand, and choose a small armor stand for the reference model just because you'll be able to see how it works. And as you can see, it's offset onto the corner because that is how the align XYZ worked when we summoned the armor stand. And then translation, change it to -18.25, -14.75, -18.25, and then scale 2.3 on all axes. And if you input all of those settings, depending on which method of custom block you're using, it should properly display your model on the block as if it were a normal Minecraft block. The final thing I want to say is that the commands and methods that I have shown here today is just one way to create custom blocks. I encourage you to expand on these ideas in order to fully customize your custom blocks into whatever you want it to be, such as the anvil dropping lucky block from the beginning of the video, which I created by just adding 3 fill commands. You can also combine the custom block system with many other data pack concepts such as loot tables, predicates, and advancements in order to create a very complex data pack.